These are not just cute fairy tale dwellings. Without them, the Icelandic people would have probably not existed. Known as torfbæir, these ingeniously designed homes helped settle one of Europe's least hospitable environments. Iceland is a place filled with lava fields, and a lot of land is remote and unhospitable. 1/5 cannot be cultivated, and about a quarter was covered with forests, which are now gone, so that meant very few materials were available to build with in the first place. Torfbæir, the turf houses, which were used for shelter since the days of the first Nordic settlers until the late 20th century, were built around basic timber frames with blocks cut out of turf, so grass and soil up to 1 meter thick, arranged over a base layer of rock and packed in to form the structure's walls and roofs. Today, they can still be found across the country, sticking out of the landscape, grass side up, like these Tolkien-like dwellings, but people no longer live in them. There is a history of building turf dwellings in similar latitudes, such as Iceland, notably in the Suomi settlements in Norway, the Faroe Islands, Greenland, Newfoundland, even as far as Scotland's Outer Hebrides. But Iceland's stand out from these for a number of reasons. They were in use for a very long period of time. They were used by all classes of people. They served as everything from sheep pens to churches, and are generally better preserved today than the counterparts. It is a living history, and what looks like a simple way to build them was actually a pretty skilled art. So late summer or early autumn was best, when conditions were neither too dry or too wet, and when roots bound the soil more firmly. Building blocks were not uneven lumps, but measured. Torfbæir used two main types of building blocks, both made of packed soil and grass, but they were shaped differently. So we have klumbur, clamped building blocks, which were angled triangular wedges with a tapered inward-facing tail stretched across the wall's thickness to knit into the structure and strengthen it. And then we had glömbær blocks, which were rectangular, ran up to 1 meter across the whole wall's thickness, and when interlaid with turf strips, strengir, made the strongest wall type. As turf continued to grow after placement, structures would become stronger and more weather-resistant over time. Each structure in a turf house complex was built individually and placed along the next, thus cutting costs by shedding walls and simultaneously increasing the warmth of the innermost structures. These structures would house the living quarters. Providing warmth was the main function here. From the 9th to the 18th century, these living quarters had no additional heating besides human or animal body heat. So remember that. Late 18th century, on the other hand, saw the arrival of the so-called bústaðarbær, which was a turf house with wooden ends. Now, the most accessible way to find a turf house is to visit the Museum of Árbær, which is also a district located in the southwest of the country. It is actually in the capital city in Reykjavik, not exactly in the city center, but you can take a bus and it will lead you there. So the Árbær Open Air Museum is where you are going to find this delightful turf house, for example. And you can also find a lot of examples in northern Iceland. Here you can find Grænvatn. It was a later addition in 1913. Laufás, which looks like terraced houses. Glömbær, which is an example of a large turf farm made up of 14 clustered houses. And in the south, you can admire Keldur, arguably the oldest turf house in Iceland, or the better known Þjóðveldisbær in Stöng, one of the internationally famous turf houses because it was a location for filming Game of Thrones as well. Hope you enjoyed this. Follow if you want more.